joining me here in the attic, so pull up a chair, grab your favorite beverage, and we'll get to crafting and memory keeping. Today I'm going to be doing my design team project for the Paper Bee Creative. I will have her link down in the description box where you can go over and grab this kit. This kit is the French Blue Envelope Book. I will be doing a beginner-friendly tutorial, getting back to basics on how to create beginner-friendly journal projects. First thing I'm going to do is do a brief flip through and tell you a little bit about this kit. I have printed the cover on 80-pound cardstock. I have printed that twice. My printer doesn't like thicker cardstock more than about 80 pounds, and it prints at a higher quality. I get very muted images when I try to print on a thicker cardstock. So what I decided I would do here is I would print the cover twice, and then I would sew them together back to back. So that's what I've done here. For front of the cover, I'm going to be using a tag and a pocket, and the kit also includes the outside spine. I'll be showing you how to use that. I printed one of the pattern paper background papers on the back so that the tag would be back. This is your accordion binding. I printed that on 80-pound cardstock. And for the envelopes, I printed this on 28-pound paper. I printed each envelope with a matching background paper on the back. So for the tutorial, I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to cut out all of my pieces. Be sure to cut your accordion binding out all as one piece. These will be scored lines, and I'll show you how to do that in the next step of the tutorial. The same thing with the outside spine. Do not cut on these lines here. They will be score lines. So cut on the outside of all your lines, and we'll come back. Okay, I've cut out all my pieces, and for 2025, I'm trying to do something a little different that I've never done before in an effort to corral all my scraps, because I tend to not want to throw those away because I always feel like I can create something with them. I'm going to start putting all my scraps in one container for the month, and at the end of the month I'm going to come back and do some kind of mass make with the scraps I had left over from that month, and then what I don't use I'll then discard. So I'm going to put these away and we'll go through our tutorial for today. Alright, so what you should have is, if you did it like I'm going to do, you have 4 pieces for your cover. If you had cardstock that was thicker and you only did the front and back and then cut it out, you will only have 2 pieces. Hope that makes sense. So I have 4. You have your outside spine, your accordion binding, your 5 envelopes, then your pocket and your tag. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to score all my pieces. If you don't have a scoreboard, you can do this on a cutting mat or even your paper trimmer. You can use the little channel in your paper trimmer where your blade goes to put it down and score that way. How I like to score is with a little stylus. And I have marked my scoreboard in the center here that just shows a center mark when I'm not using measurements. So I line that up. And I'm going to fast forward here so that you can see what I'm doing, but so that hopefully it won't take too terribly much time in the video, because this part is pretty simple. We're going to just go through and score all the lines. now that we've got all our pieces scored, we're going to get our bone folder and we're going to start with the accordion hinged binding. And we're going to fold that just like you did probably in grade school, making a little accordion fold on the score lines. Just keep going back and forth, burnishing each as you go. Take your time, that way you're getting everything straight. And you want to just keep working your way all the way down the paper. I'm going to speed this up and we'll come back to the next step. Okay, we're going to start with your accordion binding here. Make sure when you've done your folds, you have mountains and valleys, and you want your mountains on the blue side that will be attached to the envelopes. Your valleys are going to be your white side, and that'll make sense when I start gluing everything together. So you're going to have 7 mountains. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so you're going to flip this over, and now you've got your valleys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're going to now glue these valleys together, and this is going to form the spine of your book. To glue mine together, I'm going to be using wet glue. I'm using the Bearly Art Precision Craft Glue. I sometimes use art glitter glue, or again, you can use double stick tape, but again, you're going to glue these 2 sections together that are forming your valley. And I like to burnish that together to make sure it gets good adhesion. Then you'll glue the next 2 together. And keep going down your accordion fold until everything is glued together. I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. And now you've got the spine of your journal. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop before I put anything else together. I am an inker. I like to ink my edges of my projects. Some people don't necessarily like to do that, but I do. So I'm going to ink. And the other thing I'm going to do is for my envelopes, before I glue these together and ink that, I want to create a little small thumb hole to make getting things in and out of the envelopes a little bit easier. I like to use the 1.5 inch circle punch. Put the edge of the envelope in there. Try to center it as best you can. You can mark this if you want to, but I just kind of eyeball it and go through all my envelopes and create my little thumb hole. And for this project, I'm going to be inking with Hickory Smoke. I normally just use my little swatch book that I have swatched out all my inks to pick what I'm going to be using. And since this is already distressed a little bit, I kind of matched up what distressing was in the digital kit, and I thought Hickory Smoke went well with that. So I'm going to ink everything up and I'll come back. While I'm inking up this last envelope, I want to take the time to kind of tell in case you're a beginner, why I like to ink. Some people do not like this step and they don't take the time to do it, and that's fine. Everybody, you do you. If you don't like to ink, by all means don't ink. But I like to ink for a couple of reasons. I love all things vintage, so I think when I'm using the Distress inks and I ink up the edges, it does give that vintage worn look that I love. The other reason I like to ink is if for some reason you didn't quite fold these right on the line for where the design is, when you ink the edge, you get rid of any of that might show, and you get rid of the white edging where you've cut the paper. So those are the reasons I like to ink. But again, if you don't like to ink, don't worry about it. Don't take the time to do this. It is just one step, and you do you. However you want your project to look, you're the only one you have to please. Alright, so now that we've got all this inked up, I'm going to ink up the covers really quick, and basically that's just to get rid of that white line where I cut the paper. And then we're going to start assembling the journal. I'm going to try to be doing more of these beginner-friendly tutorials. So I'd love for you to leave me a comment down in the comment section if there's something you've been wanting to learn how to do, or you have some questions about something you've seen someone do and you'd like to see another tutorial on it. Leave that down in the comments. I like to create things to inspire people, so I'd love to create things that you've been wanting to see. Alright, so for my cover, since I did it in two pieces, if you did it to where you printed front and back because you've got thicker cardstock, you can skip this step. I like to sew my pages together like this. And so I don't gum up my sewing machine, what I normally do is I will flip my covers over. There's not really a top or bottom for this design, so don't worry about that. And for this part, I do like to use glue stick. I just like to add a little bit of glue, mainly in the center, to kind of tack things together. I don't want a lot of glue because my sewing's going to hold the pieces together all around the edges. But I want to go ahead and tack this together so that when I'm sewing, I have something to work with. And if I'm just doing it in the center, I don't worry about my needle and thread getting in where this glue is because I'm just going to be sewing around the edges. If you don't have a sewing machine or you want to skip this step and you can glue all the way to the edge with your glue and it would be just fine. Now that I've got these glued together, again, inking helps cover up any alignment issues you may have had when you cut. So I'm going to just ink that up really quick. And then I'm going to pause the video, take this to my sewing machine. Unfortunately, I can't really sew with my sewing machine on camera. I don't have the space for that. Maybe one day I'll have a setup where I can do that. But pretty simple. I'm just going to sew around the edges, sewing this together, and then we'll come back and start the assembly. Got my covers sewed together. I'm just going to clip this excess thread. I like to leave a little bit just hanging. That again is a personal preference. Again, if you don't have a sewing machine, don't worry about it. This is a beginner-friendly project where you could just glue those two pieces of cardstock together and it would be fine. If you have some stamps, you could do some decorative stamping around the edge, or you can just leave it blank. It's perfectly acceptable any way you want to do it. So what we're going to do is start assembling our book. The first thing I want to do is assemble my envelopes. So I'm going to set this aside for a minute. And for the envelopes, where you folded in the tabs, you're just going to add glue. Again, either double stick tape or wet glue. Either one works fine. Add your glue and just glue your envelopes together. I'm going to speed this up and go ahead and glue all 5 of my envelopes. You just want to burnish that down a little bit so that the glue sticks well. For most of my projects, you will see that I use wet glue more often than I do the double stick tape. It just works well for me. And I have found that the double stick tape sometimes in my area will dry out over time and come unadhered. So the wet glue I have not had that trouble with. What you're going to do now is take your accordion hinge that's going to be your binding system for the journal. And you're going to start gluing on the envelopes. I like to glue my envelopes where they're facing away from me, and then when I flip the book, they're to where it opens and I can pull out what I'm doing, but you can do it either way. The first thing I'm going to do is glue my cover on. You take your binding and make sure you get to the back. You'll see where you've got your back. That's your back. Lay that flat on your table, and you're going to glue your cover on this first part of the binding. Do get plenty of glue here if you're using wet glue, because this is what's going to hold everything together. Line that up and get it kind of centered. And what I do is I hold my binding against my table and then line it up that way. That way everything's kind of level. And then just burnish that in. And I just normally use my fingers to do that. So you've got your cover on. And you want to give that a little bit of time to dry. The Bearly Art glue does not dry as fast as the Art Glitter glue does. I'm still getting used to that. It's a little hard to find the Art Glitter glue in the winter time. The making of the Art Glitter glue, for some reason, it tends to separate or something if it freezes. So most companies don't like to ship that when it's cold weather. So it's easier to find the Bearly Art Precision glue in the winter time. So just be careful. Make sure you've got it stuck down, and then you'll move on to your next part of your spine for your next envelope. Again, whatever order you want your envelopes in, I'll generally lay my envelopes out kind of the way I want them to look. Get an idea. I like to put the florals kind of in between the patterned paper. And that way you kind of get a look of what it's going to look like in your book. So I'm going to start with this one. And again, I glue this side to this part of the binding. And that way it'll be in your book like that. And it flips open like that. Make sure you take your pen out of your bottle. Add the glue. And I like to turn my projects facing away from me. It tends to make it a little easier for me to then line that envelope up, kind of centered. I hope you can see that. And then press my spine down onto the envelope. And you just repeat this process with your next envelope. Again, Be mindful, if your glue's not dry yet, you'll shift your envelope around. Kind of just hold that in place. Take my next envelope, put it up against the fold, lining it up with my envelope I just glued. That way everything kind of stays in line. Press my spine down. Burnish that in with my fingers. And move to the next one. And you're just going to repeat this for each envelope. Until you have all 5 of your envelopes glued in. That last one lined up, glued in. And once you've done that, you'll have one final spine. Now for this one, you don't want to glue on this side. You want to glue on this side because this is going to be your back cover. So you'll apply your glue to the back. The one good thing about this Bearly Art precision glue is it does give you a little bit of play to stand your project up again against the table and get all your edges lined up before it's dry. And you'll end up with your book looking like this, where you've got everything glued in. I'm not going to fold the pages yet because my glue still is drying just a little bit. Now is where you'll attach the outside spine piece that you cut out. It's going to fit like this and be glued in on the front and the back. You see here with this outside spine piece, you've got 2 larger pieces that you scored that are about a 1/2 inch. That's what you're going to attach to the front and to the back of your booklet. You're going to add your glue. And I hold my book up again so I can kind of get my spine centered onto my book. That way I've got about equal distance around the front and around the back. And then just burnish that in. Flip it over. Don't add glue in here. You want this to be free-flowing. It's going to kind of be like an open spine. You're just going to add glue to that large section I showed you. Again, stand the book up. Wrap it back around so it's about equal. If you can kind of see how that's about equal distance. And then burnish that in. Give your glue a little time to dry. If you need to add some binder clips, you can kind of leave this for a little bit. I've decided I want to do this project in 2 parts so that I can allow this glue to dry and make sure everything is together before I come back and decorate it. So be sure to hit the subscription button and the notification bell so you'll be notified when I put up any new content. And until I see y'all again here in the attic, y'all take care.